美国大选的选情是非常的焦灼，所以很多人都说，不到最后1分钟，你真的是不知道是鹿死谁手。那么，华视新闻也特别为您邀请到了美国史丹佛大学政策研究部的主任陈怡仁，来为我们来进行这整个的选情的解析。那我们要来问问的就是呢，陈主任回顾之前美国 CNN 所做的民调呢，他公布了所谓的蓝墙3州，也就是我们刚刚提到的威斯康星州、密西根州还有宾州。民调显示，目前呢，贺锦丽在威斯康星州还有密西根州似乎是稍微的领先，可是我们刚刚所看到的最关键的宾州，两个人却是呈现了呢这个打平手的状况。那么老师，您的观察，您认为贺锦丽在这一次大选当中有没有机会可以成功守住蓝墙3州呢？
Well, I think it's going to be a very close race. I think that there is a scenario where she's able to win all 3 of those states that you mentioned, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. There's also a scenario where she could lose all 3 of those states or where she could divide them. Now, traditionally, historically, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin have voted in the same direction. So traditionally, they've either all gone for the Republican or they've all gone for the Democrat. So this year could be different. This could be the first time we see those states splitting. At least where we sit today, I think there's probably a slightly better chance for Harris in Michigan and Wisconsin than in Pennsylvania. But we'll see what happens, because this blue wall strategy is obviously very critical for Vice President Harris if she is going to win this election tomorrow.
好，陈老师，你刚刚提到了所谓的蓝墙策略呢，对于整个的贺锦丽选情来说是非常重要。可是我们知道，在美国的选举开票过程当中，有所谓的红色海市蜃楼，或是也被称作是蓝色转移现象。也就是说，当现场开票的时候，我们初步看起来就像我们这次的开票结果一样，呈现的都是由共和党领先。可是到稍后计算到了邮寄选票的时候，却会发现民主党是呈现后来居上。那么这也导致在过去有些部分的共和党人士对于选举的合法性提出了质疑。那么分析就指出，其实有一部分原因是因为民主党支持者他不一定是当天才去现场投票的。但是我们综合了之前所采集到的民调，就显示，在这一次超过半数的亚利桑那州还有内华达州的选民都已经完成投票，而他们当中大多数都是属于共和党的支持者。那你认为这将会对这一次的美国大选开票造成什么样的影响呢？老师？
Well, the early voting numbers have been very encouraging for Republicans in both Nevada and Arizona. There's no question that they have come out of the early voting period with an advantage relative to what we saw in 2020, for example. So I think it's important to understand that the early vote situation has changed a lot over the last couple of years. 4 years ago, Donald Trump was actively discouraging his supporters from voting early. This year, he's been encouraging his voters to vote early. So we've seen a transition, I think, in this cycle where more and more Trump supporters are voting early. And so the question becomes, does that just shift his support from election day to early vote? Is it the same number of voters just shifted earlier? Or is it actually the case that there are more new supporters of Trump? We're not going to know that until the votes get counted over the next couple of days. Arizona in particular is pretty slow to count its votes. So we probably won't have a great sense of what's happening in Arizona until we get further along over the next couple of days. Nevada also, counting can be a little slower there. You know, we may not know Nevada for a day or two. So I think the most important thing is with these 2 Western states, these 2 Sun Belt states, they're called Nevada and Arizona, it is possible that Trump has managed to secure a lot more support in these states. We just don't know yet. We don't know if that early voting phenomenon is a function of a lot more Trump supporters or just Trump supporters voting early as opposed to on election day.
那我们看到，在这次的美国大选当中，确实整个变数非常多，尤其是在选前的关键时刻呢，因为川普呢，他有帮忙站台的喜剧演员脱口而出了说波多黎各是一个海上的垃圾漂浮的垃圾岛这样的言论，惹怒了波多黎各人，那么可能会导致呢拉丁裔选民是不是会因此投下所谓的愤怒票呢？那我们来看到是大约有100万的波多黎各人，他们是生活在摇摆州的，其中有50万都在宾州。那么大 大家就很关心的是这一起垃圾争议会不会影响到了关键摇摆州，尤其是宾州的选情。但没想到呢，美国总统拜登呢，他的垃圾门失言风波，反倒却倒忙帮川普吸粉。所以这整起事件会对呢，到底是贺锦丽还是川普的选情来加分？我们持续透过的连线要来请教的是美国史丹佛大学政策研究部主任陈怡仁陈老师，请您为我们分析这个关键州，尤其是宾州的选情如何。
Well, the issues that voters are most concerned about, first of all, is the economy and the state of the economy in the U.S. And they have particular concern around the cost of living issues, how affordable or unaffordable it is to live in America. I think those are certainly issues that are top of mind. For other voters, immigration is a significant issue. There's a lot of concern about the control of the southern border and which candidate will do a better job of ensuring that there is border security and an immigration process that facilitates orderly migration to the United States. And then there's some other voters who are concerned about abortion. I think that's a big issue given the Supreme Court's overturning of the pretty significant Roe versus Wade decision in just a few years ago. So I think those are the really significant issues. In terms of what we've heard in terms of comments from both candidates, I think that it's had an impact on voters who are making their minds up in the very later part of this campaign. I would say probably 90% of voters made up their minds before all of this happened. But when you have a race as close as the one we see between Trump and Harris, those late deciding voters could be very significant. And I think for those voters, what they've seen in the last several days is a campaign from Donald Trump that has been more uneven than the campaign from Kamala Harris by and large. So I think a lot of analysts here in the U.S. believe that Trump has had a not as good of a closing stretch as Kamala Harris has, which is why there is a narrative that the late momentum in the race is in favor of Harris.
那我们要持续请教的就是呢，这个陈老师，你现在目前人身在美国，到底美国现在的氛围是如何呢？当地的民众或是官员们会不会担心在选情过后会发生所谓的暴动状况呢？我们赶快把时间交给陈怡仁老师。
Fortunately, we haven't seen any violence. There is a lot of tension. I'll say there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of tension about the election. People who support one candidate or another generally support them very strongly. And so there is a fair amount of tension, I would say, that exists right now in the country. And I think the worry is that tension will result in some kind of violence or unrest after the election. We hope that isn't the case. We really hope that isn't the case. But the predicate, the foundation is certainly there for people. Half the country is going to be upset regardless of what the outcome of the election is. So that's a very challenging situation to be in right now in the United States.
Hello， 我是蒋欣梅。想要抢先掌握最及时的新闻资讯吗？赶快订阅、按赞、开启小铃铛，锁定华视新闻 YouTube 频道。